afternoon. Well, thanks so much for joining. A second for everyone to settle in.
I did bring chocolate, by the way, so that may help everyone feel better as we're getting close to the end of the day. We're passing around some chocolates from Tiana.
So first off, I'd like to congratulate our esteemed guest here for fulfilling every child's goal, fantasy of becoming the global vice president of chocolate. Again, Matt, you've got an 8 to 10 year old, is that right?
I do. Yep.
So they're friends. I don't care if they're parents or doctors,
Marc,
lawyers.
you turn on your mic.
Oh no, now it's going to get really loud. So our global vice president of chocolate, their 8 and 10 year old must have conversations with their friends whose parents are doctors and lawyers and neurosurgeons, and they're like, yeah, my mom is global vice president of chocolate. And you just can't stand up to that one, especially now when you're handing it around. So that's pretty amazing.
They generally don't introduce me that way, but yeah.
Just mom will do.
Yeah, they're Team Snickers, Team Twix, Team Up.
I love that. So can you actually share a little bit about what you did before you joined this? So you've had a couple of other pretty interesting jobs and roles in the industry. So maybe you can give a quick 1 or 2 minutes on what you've done before you joined Mars.
Yeah, just before coming to Marc, I was at Kellogg. I think there's some Kellogg in the house. Yeah. Okay. Hey. And before that, I was at Bean Centauri, just down the street. So in the later on the spirits world as well. Sure.
All right. So there's a lot of strong brands there. So first off, what I'd like to do is I want to see how well I know Tiana. So let's see. The first question we're going to have is related to your current brands. I'm going to take a guess. You can't see what I'm holding up. I'm going to ask you not to. We're going to see. You guys can vote. I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite chocolate within your brands? Hold on a second. Now, from the audience, show of hands if you think that I'm right. Show of hands if you think I'm right. Show of hands if you think I'm wrong. All right, what is your favorite in the line?
Well, you're making me ask to pick between like children or something like that. I mean, truthfully, they're all my favorites, but the one I'm thinking of really satisfies. That would be Snickers.
Oh, I got it wrong. All right, so I'm over 1. All right. Okay. Second question. Let's try this one. You used to work for Centauri, and Bean was one of the brands. So, what is your favorite whiskey cocktail? Hold on a second. Here's my guess. Or maybe this is just mine. Okay, what is it?
I like a good basil hazy with soda.
Okay, I'm over 2. Okay, good. So now,
We know each other really. By the way, we met just this week, so we know each other super well.
So, and I'm just trying to prime it for dinner because I'm going to have all of these things, including this next one, maybe. All right, last one. Guilty pleasure cereal.
My favorite cereal is great. That would be Frosted Flakes.
All right. I feel like I got all of them right. Okay, perfect. So, let's talk through some stuff that's a little bit more serious and talk about purpose. And, I think that we're paired up because at Oracle we talk about how to protect, connect, and drive impact. How to protect someone's brand, make sure your consumers feel protected, how to connect with your consumers, connect with the industry and the world they live in, and drive impact. And it's not just sales impact, but it's also social impact, environmental impact. So I think that's why we end up connecting and getting together on this. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what is the purpose, what is the driving force of Mars and of everything that you're doing?
Yeah, well, first of all, one thing I'm really proud to work at Mars is that it is a purpose-driven company. So I think that's a really good start. It is a company that is privately held, but comes through ownership of family, that really believes in purpose as a driving force. We have an effort called Sustainability in a Generation. As a matter of fact, I was here last year talking about just that. So I think that's a really good foundation. As I think about what I'm here to talk to you about today, chocolate, I'm going to zoom in on a specific brand, and some of you are consuming it right now. In the US here, and China it's called Dove. In other parts of the world, the UK, Middle East, In India, it's called Galaxy. So Dove Galaxy, I'll be saying that a lot, is a purpose-driven brand, and I think something exciting about it is that it's transforming from a brand that was not born explicitly to be a purpose brand. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that transformation that we're currently making in market and how we're coming to live up to that.
Well, you're also running a campaign. You shared some creative too. Would this be a good time to share with everyone?
I think that's a good place to start. Why don't we watch it and then I'll talk a little bit about it.
If Galaxy chocolate tastes good to you, wouldn't it be great if it did good for others too? That's why we commit to helping women like Juliet to grow her young business. Or Ichi, to help improve income for farmers and rural education. Women like Rodias, to build a house for her family. Or for Leah, to stand up for girls in her community. Or women just like Brittany, who helps children succeed in maths. Or to many thousands more women who are connected to chocolate. Wouldn't that make the pleasure you get from it even better? By 2030, we commit to help 1 million people, including women, their families, and their communities thrive. Just a little drop of pleasure could create ripples of hope. Galaxy, your pleasure has promise.
Just a little drop of pleasure can create ripples of hope. I mean, that's an amazing campaign. That's an amazing thing to see. That it's not only a matter of selling chocolate, but it's how you can be part of the world around you. So how did you come up with that, not only campaign, but that mission, that movement?
Well, I think the first thing to know about Galaxy, is that it's a brand that has for a long time really been about women's pleasure and centered in the pleasure of women. Not that men don't consume it as well, by the way. But the core insight is really about maximizing your pleasure center through the experience of a really high quality chocolate. And that's something we're really proud of. And so as we really mined and understood the human truth behind that, something came to light, which is pleasure and satisfaction is deepened when I'm experiencing that in connection with others, and specifically when I'm helping, supporting, and caring for other people. And so as we thought about the migration from a traditional brand to a purpose-driven brand, we started with that human truth, that when I am helping others and when I'm in connection with others, my satisfaction is deeper. And that's really what helped us get to that space of really thinking about how we connect the pleasure with the purpose of the product and the brand and the mission of the brand.
So when you're thinking about that purpose, and you're thinking about your consumers, a lot of people think about their consumers as different demographics or different psychographics. How do you think about your consumers, the people you're trying to reach, the people you're trying to impact and influence and support in doing messaging like this?
Absolutely. Well, I think something important is that it's not just about a demographic, it's about a mindset. And I think our brand had really been tapping into that with women for a period of time. Historically, we've always shown women experiencing pleasure, and that doesn't really seem like a big idea right now, but back as we were expanding, and particularly in some of the markets we played, like in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, even when we first came into China, featuring a woman and centered on women's needs and her pleasure was revolutionary. In fact, when I think about the Middle East, for example, Saudi Arabia, which is one of our biggest markets, we featured women experiencing the pleasure to choose and really hold up women's empowerment. And that idea just really isn't a thing. If you Google women's anthem songs, like a whole bunch of songs come up right away. Well, if you do that there, you don't get a playlist. So we decided to create a women's anthem to celebrate the ability of women to choose when in the past, maybe they haven't had opportunities to do things just because of their gender. They maybe even within a short time ago weren't even able to drive a vehicle or have certain kinds of jobs. And so we really tapped into that idea of both empowering people, but really women's empowerment specifically, and tapping and unlocking that idea.
So, unfortunately, when people try to do good, other people can see it negatively, and there can be backlash. I think we've all seen some brands that have really focused on their purpose and tried to make a social change, tried to create a movement, and there's been a backlash one way or the other. Right or wrong, usually wrong. In this case, have you seen any sort of backlash? Has there been any sort of harm to the business, the brand?
Well, I think when you embark on a journey to purpose, you have to be ready to stand up with courage, bravery, and die on that hill. And we've seen that with certain brands, I think, in a quite incredible way. I think about Ben & Jerry's, or I think about people burning Nikes. Oh my gosh. But I think that really reinforces that you have a conviction and a belief behind your purpose. And so I think that's really how we set out on this journey. We definitely anticipated the possibility of having backlash. I mentioned some of the markets we're in, and it's not a great idea to tell them, hey, you're not really uplifting and empowering women in your country. So we definitely did anticipate that possibility. We haven't seen any type of backlash, but I think the way that we really thought about it was how do we drive real meaning and impact? And I think that's really hard to argue with when you're changing people's lives tangibly.
The idea of changing people's lives, and there were a couple examples in there, and I actually wrote them down. So Juliet, helping her run businesses, Ichi, helping for farmers and education, Leah for girls in the community, and Brittany for math. Those are some great examples. How do we know that it's not a marketing spiel? How do we know that there's some truth and some realness behind it?
Well, the first thing I'd say is every single one of the women you saw featured are real women. Real women that we've touched through our work, and I think that's something we're very proud of. I see Stephanie there, and our hallways are beaming with a lot of pride for the work that we've done. But I think, and it reminds me, I caught the end of the last talk, it's just that you have to really think about it as acts, not ads. And it really comes down to measurement. Like, what really matters to you at the end of the day? Like, yes, we're in it to drive the business, but we also have to really think about measurement in terms of real, tangible impact to people and their lives. And that's how we set out and embarked upon this. So it's really partnering with the right partners, in our cases, NGOs and volunteer organizations, to create programming that tangibly changes the way that people experience life. So I'll just talk about two. One is in our cocoa growing regions in Cote d'Ivoire, or Ivory Coast, and Ghana. That's where 70% of the cocoa supply comes from in the world. We partnered with an NGO called CARE, and we created village savings and loans programs for women in cocoa growing communities. Why is that important? Well, first of all, we could invest in farmers, but a lot of times farmers are men. Does that mean women are not doing farm work? No, it does not. Women may not be able to be called farmers because they may not have the ability to have land titles. So they are, in every sense of the definition, farmers, but they don't have the ability, the legal right, the access to own land, just as an example. So by creating these village savings and loan programs, we've provided the opportunity for women to save, to have access to funding when they're unbanked, and have the ability to grow and invest in small businesses like the ones you saw featured in the spot. So that's one example. But we don't really sell the bulk of our products there in Africa, so we also thought about how to make it real and make it local and tangible for some of our biggest markets. So our biggest market around the world is in China, and just to ensure that women could connect, people could connect with this idea beyond those that are far away, where we're really driving scale and impact and change. We also created local programming to help people in the market in China, or empower people in the market in China. And so we really got this insight that while it's a very highly educated nation, actually very high rates of literacy, education, that there is a demographic of people, that women specifically, that are in rural areas, and they call them left behind women, because they don't have access to education and or great jobs. So we created an all-women's academy to give people the opportunity to learn a trade and skill and be able to support themselves in a tangible and meaningful way. So when we talk about allowing people to thrive, it's really hardcore measurable impact, and we hold ourselves accountable to that.
You talk about measurement and being able to measure the impact. How are you measuring not only the impact of those lives, but how this actually results in sales? And the reason I push on that a little bit is you have a budget for this now. What is your budget on this right now? How, in terms of the sustainability, in terms of some of these social programs, are you willing to share how much you're spending on that?
We're privately held, so I can't get into all the nitty-gritty of that, but what I will say is we classify ourselves as a brand as activists, and what that means is that we're essentially the majority of our investment is going towards purpose-driven work. So that would be at greater than 90%.
Okay, so then when you're securing budget for that internally, how can you avoid that budget by going by the wayside? You said you want to empower and change the lives for 1 million people between now and 2030. And a lot of things can change. Leadership teams change, executives change over in the next 7 years. So, how, with one bad quarter, how does that not all go away?
Well, I think there are two things. One is that it is a movement, not a moment. So, and that's really how we think. As I mentioned, we have a program called Sustainability for Generations. So one of the things of being a privately held company is that gives us the freedom to not be a slave to the quarterly report. We really can invest in things that matter to us, that we think is the right thing to do for our associates, for the people that we serve, and for their communities and the world. So I think that's one piece. I think the broader question you're asking, though, is how do you make money with this? And for this work in particular, it was really important for us to think about how to bring this work on purpose in alignment with driving the business. And sometimes there's a false dichotomy set up that you can either do something that's impacting the world, or you can either drive your business. And we try to disrupt that and not approach it that way and say, we believe that we can change the world and drive the business. And so we brought those things together and really thought about the way that we formed our KPIs on the business. And I would say that the market is rewarding us. So when I look at how we're performing, by the way, this is our first ever global campaign. So we have had work in market to market, but our first ever global campaign launched in International Women's Day. How are we doing? We are, we're winning the conversation, we're winning with key influencers, and we're winning with consumers. So, in terms of winning the conversation, we've had over, just in the 2 markets we've launched, China and UK, over 1.5 billion impressions. We are winning that, and plenty of earned media to go with it. In terms of winning with key influencers, this work is influencing people who have the ability to change and touch policy. So, for example, in the UK, our team met with the UK House of Parliament to really work on this issue of sustainability. And, that's not, I don't know how many people can say that every day, but, the fact that we're able to get with key governments and influence and really think through how to drive tangible change in the world feels like something really special. Our customers are quite happy with this as well. We've gotten different awards from the grocer and things like that. And then winning with consumers, they're voting with their feet, they're voting with their wallets. And we've seen a 10% lift in sales in the UK, 5% in China, which is, if thinking about the broader macro dynamics, we feel pretty darn good about. And when we think about things like rep track data, where we track our reputational performance and perception in the marketplace, we've had a 14% increase just in the time that we've launched this. So I'd say we feel pretty good about it. But at the end of the day, what really matters is the impact that we have on real women, and I'd love to just let you hear from them yourselves.
像我们一个群里面几乎都是留守的，我也不知道到底哪一个才是我们这个城市的发展潜力，或者是我自己本人的发展潜力。
啊，这段时间真是我的
真的想去哪就去哪，想去看看大海。
就是人家总以为我们贵州是山旮旯嘛不好，其实我觉得我们是有很多很好的东西。这个学习以后能把我们的这些文化推广出去嘛。从第一天来上学的时候，都被那个课程给吸引了。以前我们就说甜品，我都不知道什么叫甜品，但是这次我们会做巧克力甜品，而且是好几种。
下面我宣布，州服商学院江州女性人才发展项第一期闭关今天就要毕业了。
毕业什么感觉？
太开心了！哇，发财的感觉！一半开心，还有一半想再
来，是不是啊？
I think that's a pretty good metric right there. That's pretty amazing to see. The real impact you're having, it clearly is impacting not only globally, but you're impacting local communities as well. How did you take some of these initiatives that you started globally and like that start to localize them? And China's a huge market, but then localizing at the state level and even the rural areas like you mentioned.
Yeah, that's such a great question, and honestly, one we really struggled to wrestle down because, as I said before, it was really important for us to think about driving impact from the seed all the way to the shelf. And so, in that sense, it led us to the source, the cocoa, to really think about where we wanted to start this idea. But at the end of the day, how many people have been to a farm? How many people have been to a cocoa farm? How many people can point out on a map where cocoa growing regions are or know what they are, right? So it was really important for us to think about what resonates with consumers, and that really started by having a clear strategy. Knowing that we were about women's empowerment gave us the ability to think about the sweet spot between what consumers want, what our brand's about, and the impact we can have in the world. And so we took that filter down to the local level and asked people, what do you care about? What issues matter to you? What's really important? And so you'll see that we're doing different things. In China, it's the All Women's Academy. In the UK, we're focusing on young women and really ensuring that they close the income and equality gap in the workplace. So we partnered with Young Women's Trust there. So I think that giving that freedom within a framework to say, here's the strategic umbrella that we're working under, but the flexibility to do what has maximal impact and resonance with local consumers was a really important consideration for us.
You mentioned a lot of things. I've got a few more questions, but I want to first open up for the audience. I'm sure there are a lot of questions here, so does anyone want to ask a question, Tiana, before I go on?
Have you had a chance to travel to those countries and actually meet some of those women yourself?
I have not yet, but several on our team have. And actually, I should mention, obviously, I'm here speaking, but there are an army of associates at Mars and our agencies and our partners that were part of making this happen, because it's no small thing. But yes, in this event, we actually did have our associates go out, connect, and have an event and really interface. So this is not something we're just throwing money at, letting a third party do it, and then being hands off. Like, it's really critical and essential to us to really deeply and meaningfully engage in a real way. Travel budgets. I already had done my China trip this year, and
Other questions?
Are you going to expand this into different markets eventually?
we are, yes. So the majority of our, we do have a global presence, and so right now we're already out in China and the UK, as I mentioned, but later this year we'll be out in the Middle East, so Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and then it's coming to India as well.
Others? I do have a question in terms of staffing your team. How do you interview and understand people's values while still being open to difference of opinions?
Ooh, I mean, that's like a class.
I know it's a hard one, but it's so values driven. But at the same time, you're obviously very open people's difference of opinion. So how do you go about doing that?
Well, I think it's a values-driven company, so I'm sure each of you joined each of your companies for a reason. And if you were in the good, fortunate place to say, I want to make a match and not just, I have to take this job because of the job market, you then kind of are able to say, do the values here match with the values of the place I'm at? Mars has a value called mutuality, and it's really about this idea that creating this win-win. So when I win, you win. But we extend that not just internally, we extend it externally. So we believe not only that when one associate wins, the other wins, we also believe that when our customers win, we win. When our consumers win, we win. When our communities win, we win. And so we're able to approach it in a way that that's a grounding value that helps us stay really focused, and you can always come back to that. Now, do people disagree? 100%. I mean, I'm telling you, we dragged us to mat on some of these things before they went out the door. I think the reason why we were able to work well together was because our ultimate guiding light was doing the right thing to have a positive impact through the purpose of the brand. And so the arguments weren't about my ego or your ego, or I have more experience than you, or I'm smarter than you. It was more about what's right to drive the maximum impact to people. That's a different kind of conversation.
So then, two last questions. I think that one is, if you had a little bit of quick advice for someone who wants to get their organization to go down the path of embracing purpose, investing in purpose, and living by it, how would you have them go about that conversation?
How would I go about the conversation? I think it's a mindset. So I'll kind of give you two ideas. One is acts, not ads. And the second is a movement, not a moment. Acts, not ads. This is not about advertising or media weights. It's about really having true and meaningful impact in the marketplace. If you start there, if you start with what are my KPIs for driving true and meaningful impact in people's lives, that's a really damn good place to start. So I would really get focused there. And once you've done something, you've got something to say. In terms of it's a movement, not a moment, it's really easy to get swept up in the emotion of wanting to do something in a moment, but it's hard work. It's difficult work. And also, when you start to impact communities, the stakeholders go outside of your doors. You're talking about real people's lives. So coming in and touching people and walking away felt like not an option for us. They mentioned the goal. You may have heard the goal goes out to 2030. We're in this for the long haul. So I think my advice would be buckle up.
There's so many great takeaways. A movement, not a moment. I love that. The idea of delivering pleasure, but a deeper degree of pleasure. All these things are just takeaways we can apply to so many parts of our lives and bring back to our own organizations. I'll end with one final question. What's winning look like for you?
I would love to blow through that 1 million. So I think the challenge has been laid down, and we're going to work very hard to touch as many people as we can in a meaningful and sustainable way.
Fantastic. Long-term sustainable goal. I love it. Tiana, thanks so much for joining today, and thanks everyone for being here.